So a big thematic that you're going to hear about is fostering, because we heard from you that there's a lot of interest around how do we amp up our foster programs or even begin one. So before we get started, I really want to recognize a few incredible partners. A big thank you to Kristen Hassen, who has always been from Outcomes for Pet, who continues to guide this work and help shape this work. Our 2024 partner was Shelter Animals Count. I do want to thank the team there, but we're also excited to welcome Adopt a Pet, a new partner this year. And so you're going to be hearing more from my friend, colleague, and brilliant person, April Huntsman. So Adopt a Pet's going to bring some new data together. Last year we focused on shelter animal count, which looked at shelter data. Now we're going to combine that and marry that with consumer insights. So what's really driving? How can we engage with those communities? And so we launched Foster 50 at Animal Care Expo earlier this year. And again, we heard from more than 1,200 shelters and rescues that were really interested in foster. How can we, what tools do we have? What resources? What insights can we leverage and real world strategies to help drive our programs? So today's session is going to kick off with a deep dive into public perceptions around fostering. What motivates people? What holds them back? So you're going to learn more from April. And so with that, I'm going to introduce her. She's our partner from Adopt a Pet, and she's the Senior Director of Animal Welfare. April.
Thank you so much, Deb. Yeah, I was so excited, to brainstorm with other people around foster. But two, we at Adopt a Pet actually have had interest around fostering for several years now. And we did our own study many years now at this point where we wanted to kind of just get a feel for the people coming to our site and their interest in fostering. This has been, I think, probably 4 years ago now. And when we did that initial research, we just asked one question: are you interested in fostering? And overwhelmingly, people said yes, but we kind of just left it at that. We tried some different things and nothing really took off. We kind of considered it a test and learn. And we always had these things in the back of our minds that there is interest in foster, but we didn't really know what to do with it. So when Pedigree Foundation came forward and said, can we talk about fostering? We said, yes, we're all in. And one of the great things about Adopt a Pet is we have access to the consumer, general public, the community, in such a large volume and a large scale that we're able to glean insights quickly. We don't have to wait years to get this data. We can do this very, very quickly. So we all put our heads together to say, what do we want to know? And that was basically how this survey came to be. We have all these questions. You're going to see so much data. We do have Kristen Hassen on the call as well, who I am very thrilled to have because we're going to not just show the data, but we're going to talk a bit about the data and what we can learn from the data, what insights we have, what we can do with it. So this is not just me presenting the data, but you're going to hear some conversation back and forth throughout. I encourage you to ask questions through the Q&A, or you can also use the chat. And we will definitely get to questions throughout this presentation. We have plenty of time to talk about any of the questions that come up as we go along. We're also going to have some polls, so keep your eye out for those as they're going to come through. So first, what was the ultimate goal around this community survey? We wanted to understand two things related to pet fostering. We wanted to understand, what do people think about fostering? How do they work? What's their understanding of how they work, to see if there's some disconnect there? And then what is the community's interest in pet fostering? Because we know you as animal welfare professionals, you know the people that come in or reach out to you, but what is just the general community, the general public's interest? And we're going to do some math. I'll do the math. You don't have to do the math, but I just want to call out Adopt a Pet receives over 3 million visitors every single month. So when we start looking at this data and we apply the math, keep in mind that we're talking millions of people who are coming to the site who are telling us this information in these surveys. So our first big bucket of data we're going to talk about is understanding the general public's understanding of how pet foster programs work. What do they think about fostering? Do they actually understand how it works? And what's their perception? So the first question we asked is, are you familiar with the concept of pet fostering? And we asked this on both pages where people are looking at dogs and pages where people are looking at cats. And I've separated out dog seekers versus cat seekers because there are some differences in some of the data. Not huge differences in all of the data, but we will see somewhere it's definitely some differences around perceptions and understanding and interest. So what do we find from this? That we as animal welfare organizations are really good about communicating to the community what fostering is. So they have awareness of it, they know it exists, and we've done a good job. So yay, we're starting off strong here. So then we're going to actually start a poll. Let's do this. And this poll is right in line with the next data point. So what I want to hear from you is, what are the needs your foster program is fulfilling for your organization? And you can select um, what that is. So we've got, is it providing temporary homes till the pet's adopted? Is it learning about the personality of the pet and seeing the pet in the home environment? Is it to open up space at your organization? Is it to prevent the pet from entering your organization? Or is it to, what was the last one? They keep moving around. I think I got them all. So let's see. We got 30 plus answering. Still got people answering here. Okay, I'm going to give you just a few more seconds here before I end the poll. There we go. Let's go ahead and see the results. So 90% said providing a temporary home until the pet's adopted. Everyone said learning about the personality of the pet. We've got the next one is providing care while the pet is under medical treatment. We've got quite a few there, 46% at trial adoptions or foster to adopt, 64% opening up space. So how does this measure against the public? What does the public think it is? So when we asked, what do you understand the primary purpose of pet fostering? And for the community, we only let them select one because there was we needed to be able to kind of analyze the data. So the community believes that the primary reason is to provide a temporary home until the pet's adopted. So there's definitely some opportunity here because of course that is one of the purposes, but we definitely want to learn more about the pet while they're in the home, right? This is the opportunity, especially when you're a shelter. And one of the things that really got me here was we've done the data around personality traits. And as Adopt Pet, we know what helps people click on the pet. And the second one here, that's learn about the personality of the pet and see a pet in the home environment, it was only 8% of dog seekers and 11% of cat seekers. However, our foster caregivers should be learning about the pet because that is what drives interest. 3 times interest when a pet has personality traits. We're talking 3 times as many applications and inquiries on that pet if they have personality traits. So that there's really an opportunity here that when we have people who are fostering pets to really give them some guidelines of what are they there to do. Of course, they're there to provide that temporary home, but we want them to learn about the personality. We want them to um, basically drive interest on that pet by understanding what does a pet prefer, what does it not prefer, is it house trained, is it good with kids, cats, dogs, all of those things.
I
Um,
I'd say something about this slide
yes.
that's really interesting. I think it's really interesting that most people believe that the primary purpose is temporary home until the pet is adopted because so many programs make people bring the animals back for adoption. Like you held it for 2 weeks, now it needs to come back and be adopted, but people are expecting to keep the animals through adoption already, which is something I think we could really leverage more effectively.
Yeah, and I think we see that in some of the later data around people believing that they will get to keep that pet until it's adopted, and also when we look at timelines. So I think that's a very, very valid point. And I can't see the chat. So if my other co-hosts here see anything in the chat, please feel free to interrupt and let me know. So this was a question around understanding of responsibilities when they're fostering a pet. So what do they believe the typical responsibilities are of a foster pet? And you can see here that in general, people understand that they're going to have to feed and socialize and exercise and groom and kind of all of those things. But this is to Kristen's point about finding an adopter and keeping them until they actually find a new home for them. So let's find out here, how many of you allow your foster caregivers to find adopters for your foster pets, for their foster pets? Okay, we've got lots of responses coming in. And it looks like yes is gonna win here,
Thank
which
goodness.
is great.
Yeah. It's okay if you said no too.
Yeah, it's totally okay. What's really interesting about finding an adopter is, I think, yes, in general, what my perception of animal welfare organizations is that you allow the foster to find the adopter and say, hey, here's the adopter. But where things start to get really nuanced is, can the foster process the adoption, and can the pet go directly to the new home from the foster home? Or does the pet need to come back to the shelter and get processed at the shelter? We start to see a lot of nuance there, and differences between it on processes. Wouldn't you agree, Kristen? Yeah, gets very different there. So what is the insight we can glean from this data is that in general, the community understands what the responsibilities are of fostering, with some variations between dog and cat seekers. And of course, anytime we talk about training, um, dog seekers are going to understand what training means from like a dog training perspective. Anytime we're talking about cat training, I would just assume that people are thinking like litter box training, maybe less so about teaching them how to sit and stay, but maybe they're thinking that. We don't have the data. We didn't ask additional questions around like, what do you believe training is? Let me stop this. So what type of animals do you think are typically fostered? So what's interesting here is dog seekers think they're kind of all fostered. So any pet, senior pets, pet recovering from medical, behavior, puppies. But when it comes to cats, I would say we've done a really good job of explaining that kittens need to go to foster. There's awareness out there around foster programs specifically for kittens. What's interesting though about cat seekers is they definitely are less aware around cats that maybe need to get out of the shelter because they are having some behavior issues or because they're recovering some medical issues. Cat seekers are less aware of those other populations. So there's an opportunity there to educate your community on why cats, not just kittens, benefit from going to foster. And then this question was like, where do people look when they want to foster? And what we see here is that, a third go to shelter and rescue websites. And then we've got people who are coming to adoption websites like Adopt Pet. Then you've got this Google search. And basically here, you definitely need to have your foster program on your website. And you probably should have a dedicated pet page for this because it's likely a big part of your operations. And then one thing I will call out, and if you've ever heard a presentation from me, you'll know I have a lot to say about this, but you really have to make sure that that page is also indexed so that when somebody searches foster a pet near me, your foster page shows up, not your main website. Because if your main website's showing up, then people have to click around your website to find the information about fostering, which you could lose them. You want to make sure that your foster page that's dedicated to talking about your foster program and how you become a foster shows up in that Google search. So how much support would they expect from a shelter or rescue organization? This one I don't think is surprising. People expect that you're going to provide medical care and supplies. So you're going to make sure the pet gets spayed and neutered. You're going to make sure if it needs any future medical care that you're providing it. And when it comes to dogs, we see that there's definitely an expectation that you're going to provide some training support for that dog. So that could be crate training, house training, kind of basic live in a home with people training. There's also an expectation around training support for cats, and this could be that litter box training support, but also pet supplies. So, a third said we expect that we're going to get pet supplies, and you're going to see throughout that when it comes to cats, there definitely tends to be more of an expectation that you're going to provide litter boxes, litter, some of those more of those supplies. So now I'm going to jump into interest in pet. Are there any questions that I should address before we move on? I don't think so. Okay, great.
No,
I'll
but
move on.
folks can put questions in the chat. I'm monitoring the chat. So if you just stick them in, we'll see them. I don't think people can chat. I am looking right now, but yeah, I don't think people can actually use the chat. So go ahead and use
Yeah,
that.
I can't see it as well, Kristen. I was just going to send Mary a note about it. Yeah.
Okay, use the
Question, can you do the Q&A? On Zoom, the Q&A button.
would one of our attendees test this for us?
Okay, testing. Yes, yes. Okay, now we see
Okay,
it.
great.
Yay,
Thank you,
awesome.
Danielle and Clara. Okay. We're not alone on this call, Deb and Kristen.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent. So we know where we can actually, people can ask questions. Great. So now I'm going to get into the interest because that's really like what we're here for, right? So great. People have this perception of fostering and understanding, and yes, there's some room for improvement there, but what's the actual interest in fostering? So we asked the question, have you ever considered fostering a pet? And this actually is, I think, is quite high, that roughly half of the people coming to our site have considered fostering a pet. And so what's interesting is you could look at this as a glass half empty kind of situation, like, oh man, only half. But I did these like rough math in my head. My hometown has 8,000 people in it. I'm from a very, very rural town that I would say is not likely to have like a huge number of fosters. So then I looked at my town has 8,000 people, but there's only 2,700 households because there's multiple people per household. If half those people in that town were interested in fostering, that's 1,300 households. My community does not take in 1,300 pets a year at their shelter. So it's actually quite substantial when you take this number and put it against your own community. We take this number and say there's 3 million people on Adopt a Pet in 1 month. That's 1.5 million people that considered fostering a pet. So the numbers get really, really big. So there's a lot of people out there that have considered. And in future presentations, we're going to talk about potentially why they're not fostering. But now we have the data. 1 out of 2 people have considered fostering. All righty, another poll. I know you guys love these as much as I do. Let me see if I can go back to, we are on poll 4. So before I show the results of how interested people are, let's see what you think. How interested do you think the community is in fostering? Where do you think they land? Not at all interested, slightly interested, somewhat interested, very interested, or extremely interested? So I see we're getting a lot of somewhat interested, so kind of middle of the ground is where we think everybody's going to land.
I'm gonna say very interested since I can't vote.
Okay. What do you think, Deb?
I'm going to say very interested as well, because I think
Okay.
people are interested. They just don't know what to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's see where we landed. So we landed at 65% said somewhat interested. We've got 13% at very interested and slightly interested. So here's where it actually landed. So you've got both extremes. You've got 1 in 4 who are like, yeah, no, I'm not interested at all. But what's pretty incredible is how many people are extremely interested in fostering. And then that 4 number, that's not neutral either. That's very interested. So when you consider how many people said they'd considered fostering, and then how many people are saying that they're extremely interested in fostering, there's a lot of market share out there we can capture into our foster programs that we are not. Because I think everybody on this call and every organization we talk to is saying that they need more pets to go to foster, whether that's they need more foster homes or they need the fosters to move more quickly through the foster program. There is interest, extreme interest at this point. So we then asked the question about motivation. Why would somebody want to foster a pet in the first place? And what's great is a lot of people are saying it's to help pets in need. So there's awareness out there that fostering a pet does help a pet in need. But what's really interesting is about these like trial adoption experiences. If we look at to test if pet ownership is right for me and to experience pet ownership without long-term commitment, those really are two groups that are very much about um, trial adoption, right? I'm not sure. I've never owned a pet before. So can I test this out? And more so with dogs, 15%. And then the other thing with long-term commitment, we've got 12% of cat seekers saying, wow, I would like to foster to experience owning a cat without that long-term commitment. And I think this kind of goes to the way we talk to cat adopters in our organizations around you don't really know what a cat's going to be like for a period of time. So you're kind of committing to that cat without actually knowing the personality of the cat. Whereas dogs, you can get to know them pretty quickly. And so I think that the trial adoption experience is something that people are interested in. And I think we're going to see some data in some future presentations around how that can really engage your community. Okay, let's see here. Okay, this is a big one, and if you saw any of the posts anywhere, you might have the answer to this. But the next question we asked is what types of pets in the community are people interested in fostering? So let's see how y'all perform here. What type of pets do you think your community is interested in fostering? Let's see. Puppies, kittens, seniors, any pet that needs fostering, pets recovering from medical, and pets with behavior challenges. Let's see where we land here. Puppies and kittens are really high up there. Let's see. We'll give everyone just a few more seconds to answer. Okay, here we go. So where we landed is 84% puppies and kittens, 30% senior pets, 33% any pet needing foster, medical, 19%, and behavior is 7%. So the public actually is quite different. So what we see here is that when it comes to cats, cat seekers understand that kittens are, they're interested in fostering kittens, probably because they're a little bit easier. But I think the stat that blew all of us away, and I think we're going to be talking about for quite some time, is how many people are interested in fostering senior pets, specifically senior dogs. So 46% of the people are interested in fostering senior dogs. And where this really hits for me is we did a study with Whistle activity trackers a few years ago, and it showed that senior dogs were the most negatively impacted by time spent in the shelter. And so if we take that we know they're the most negatively impacted through rest levels, licking, scratching, and we have so many people who are willing to foster senior dogs, it seems like that is the fastest path out of the shelter for senior dogs because we know they can take longer to get adopted. We know there are fewer people searching to adopt senior dogs, but it turns out there's a lot of people who would foster a senior dog. So I think this is really fascinating. Anything that you'd like to add, Kristen, on this one?
Well, I think that, that it's interesting because we ask people, medical issues and behavioral challenges. I think part of this data has to be contextualized in how we ask for help in those two areas because this makes me think about people understand what puppies and kittens are. They understand what senior pets are. You get into any pet needing fostering, and they're like, oh, what does that mean? And then you get into this like medical and behavioral category where we may need to reframe how we're asking people for help in those areas. For instance, asking for help with, ringworm kittens is different than just saying we need help with our medical animals because people are like, are their guts going to be all over? Are they going to have diarrhea everywhere? So, some of these are. I think it would be it's interesting to dive deeper into them. But the senior pets one. I'm in so many shelters where senior animals are stuck in care and they're quiet. I mean, they're usually quieter, right? They're not the completely insane animals, some exceptions, but they should be leaving immediately. Like we should be pathing them to foster day one. They come in the shelter, especially if they're a bonded pair, they've lived in a home, like all of these things. I think we're treating them like they're part of this general population, but they really do have special needs and they're very, very, very placeable, as we see here.
Yeah, I think one of the easier pets to foster as well to introduce to your other pets at home, maybe they have medical needs, but as far as like usually you're not dealing with severe separation anxiety or, they tend to tolerate other pets in the household quite well. Maybe it's because I have a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old Chihuahua laying next to me right now, but I have a soft spot for senior pets. But I couldn't agree more that prioritizing senior pets going to foster as quickly as possible would be extremely beneficial, not only for the pet, but for the capacity at your organization as well, because they do tend to stay longer. Yeah, I think this was the slide that, yeah, I was excited to share the data point.
Really important.
So, how long would you ideally be able to foster a pet? This was another one that I was surprised to see that people are willing to foster pet for quite a long period of time. And this just goes back to the senior dog thing. If senior pets take longer to place, well, there's a big portion of the population that's willing to keep them 3+ months. So it's not like they're expecting that this dog or this cat would get placed very, very quickly. And so, how can we truly understand the foster that is willing to keep a pet longer and how to place the right type of pet with that foster? If it's somebody who says, I can only have this pet for a few weeks, maybe they're getting the highly, you know, placeable pets into their care because they can only have them for that period of time. But how do you get those ones that may take longer to place into those people that are willing to keep them longer? And then really about keeping fosters engaged and getting them to help promote their own pets as well so that they're not stuck. We hear that pets can get stuck in foster because the fosters can become disengaged or disinterested in placing the pet, which we're going to show some data on why they may be disinterested in placing the pet. But basically, the thing we see here is that the community is willing to foster the pet for a decent period of time. The majority of the public, at least who took this survey. So this goes into why are they concerned or what are their hesitations around fostering? And this is a big one. So the biggest thing here is that they are worried about the emotional attachment or saying goodbye to the pet. And I think this speaks to why some pets get stuck in foster for a very long time because the person doesn't actually want to say goodbye, or they don't know how to say goodbye or how they're going to cope with saying goodbye or sending that pet on to the next home. Um, so this is not really. I would say this is a poll, but I really wanted to hear from everyone here. What do you think that we can do to help foster caregivers prepare mentally to let their foster pet go to a new home? What are the things that we can do to support them? And so I'll leave this.
Well,
Yeah.
before answering this, can I also say that like on my top list of pet peeves is shelters that don't allow the foster to adopt the pet. And the rationale behind this is often, well, we need them to foster other animals. But it's extremely traumatic for people. I foster all the time, and like 1 in 50 I adopt because I'm like, I don't want to part with this animal. Like this animal spoke to me and I'm gonna keep it, and then I foster more. So it's like really realizing that people have a fear around that. We could be messaging up front, like, we do not in any way expect you to adopt your foster. You can bring back your foster pet anytime you face an issue that you really can't tackle, but we also completely support you if you decide you want to adopt your foster pet, if there's a family member who falls in love with it, and letting people know that really they are empowered and that they have control over kind of the outcome, because there is no good reason not to give people a whole variety of options on how their foster pet ends up getting placed.
Yeah, I think I had some experience with once you've fostered hundreds of pets, I think you become better at this. But one of the interesting things I saw with a foster was the way that she was able to cope was we had another pet ready for her that needed fostering. And so she was able to understand that she was like there's a pet waiting for her that truly needs help. And some people can benefit from like having another one ready when that one's ready to go. And I think empowerment is so big here, because if you as the foster are able to work with the adopter directly, it does make it easier than just taking it back and you don't actually ever know where the pet ended up or who it ended up with. And you can even have relationships with the owner,
That's
the new
another one.
adopter.
Not letting the foster talk to the adopter. Like these rules just they harm connection. And that foster is the best bet. If that animal gets adopted and never needs rehomed, you should hope the people are connected. The adopter is connected
Yeah.
to the foster, because that foster 9 times out of 10 is gonna be like, bring the animal back, I got it. So, we can help build those bonds and instead of kind of policing everything. And some shelters are doing great with it, and some shelters have a long way to go.
And Kristen, I agree,
Well,
because you become
oh,
an advocate for that pet, but also I think it's an important bond to be able to be involved in helping to place that pet, right? Because then you feel good. You feel, that they're going to be in the best home ever. So totally agree with you, because I can see that, within the environment that I'm in right now, because we actually have Foster 50, and we actually have people here that are fostering, taking dogs to stay out. Because, people were a little leery about it, but now, based on education and messaging, they're all in. I can do a dog's day out. I can do a weekend, a short term. So it's super exciting to see people get
So
engaged that
cool.
way.
yeah. So the answers, we got 40 people that actually submitted an answer. I can't share those because they're like long answers, but what we're going to do is when you get the follow-up email with the recording, we're going to share out the ideas that people had around how we can help support people in saying goodbye to their foster pet, see what we can get, what kind of good ideas we can get from the group. So one other just quick call out here is this was a very interesting one, and I actually talked about this with other folks at Adopt Pet around for cat seekers and potential cat fosters. There is some concern around cost more so than some of these other things. And so if we can really be clear around what support you're giving when you're sending cats out to foster, what supplies you're providing, what medical care you're providing, I think that can really help drive down that concern or that hesitation.
And people can, if you're an underfunded shelter, one of the things you can do is give people the option, either give them a paper that has all the lists of supplies they need on it, or give them all the supplies and give them an option. And you can even solicit donations. A lot of fosters will donate to pay it forward to other fosters. Like, you will balance it out, but having that option to provide food and supplies without saying we provide food and supplies to every foster is a great kind of middle ground.
That's a great point. Okay, we're getting closer to the end here. What kind of support would you need from a shelter or rescue to feel comfortable fostering? Um, Everyone needs medical care and supplies. And I think this kind of goes to the cost of medical care and supplies. They want to feel like you're going to provide that for them, that cost and expertise is going to come with the pet, that they're not going to have to go out and find that on their own. When we talk about dogs, we do see behavioral support is needed by almost 50%. And then when we get to pet supplies, we see the cats go up, right? So we're talking about litter boxes and maybe crates and litter and things like that. One interesting thing here is the 24/7 emergency contact. So in order for someone to feel comfortable fostering, they have to feel like they've got somebody they can reach out to if there's an emergency. And I'm not sure how many organizations have this available, but we Adopt Pet as part of the Foster 50 Challenge. We are actually doing some work with a couple of technology partners that have this, they're offering for the foster program. So we should have some data that will get out of that we'll be able to share. But that's a pretty big piece in order to get people to feel more comfortable fostering.
And the great one of the things that you can do if you don't is this is such a barrier for shelters is even having a closed Facebook group where people can talk to each other and you have peer-to-peer support overnight. And then having an emergency vet route for true emergencies. These are both ways that you can do this without having to have somebody on the phone, because I've had plenty of crying foster coordinators exhausted. But there are ways you can kind of provide support, even if it's not that one person on your team doing foster.
Yeah, the we did some research around like what do shelters and rescues need to kind of grow their programs or increase their adoptions or whatever. Foster program support, 24/7 emergency contact comes up so often because there are just not enough people working in shelters and rescue organizations to actually do this full time 24/7. Or even if they can do it for a period of time, burnout is likely to be higher in those people that can have no work-life balance because all they're doing is answering calls from fosters. So what kind of information would be most helpful when considering fostering? So clear descriptions. People want to know what's going to be expected of them. And this to me should be really low hanging fruit. What is the description of my foster role? What is expected of me? What's expected of the shelter or rescue organization? And how do I handle things when things come up? I think this is something that people can do as a team and come up with these, and they don't even need to be updated very often because these things don't change so quickly. And for dog seekers, they want the description of the role, but with cat seekers, within that description, having information about financial support details, links to training guides on how to get a cat to use a new litter box or introduction to other pets at home, things like that would be really, really helpful. And then the last two, even though they don't have high percentages, so easy to get and share. Testimonial from foster parents that have had a wonderful experience. I've talked about net promoter score of your fosters before. I've talked about how to do a CSAT or customer satisfaction of your foster, sharing those numbers. And then success stories. Um, we know at Adopt a Pet, one of the emails that people look forward to every single month is when we're sharing a happy adoption story from a pet that's been rehomed successfully. So, sharing a success story every month with a foster pet can really help keep people engaged and helps them see that your program works and that they want to be part of that. And then the last question is, would you be interested in attending an informational session or webinar about pet fostering? And we saw here 1 in 5 people were like, yeah. And half of them were like, maybe. Um, so people are interested. We see that over and over throughout this data. We just need to look at some of the data and address some of those reasons for hesitation or the populations that we're trying to get into foster. And one of the things about informational sessions is being, you know, I think everyone at this point has like onboarding, whether that's onboarding webinars or trainings or things like that. But when we're talking about informational sessions, how can we do this that are like low barriers? So they're accessible via YouTube, or people can listen to on a podcast. People are listening to fosters talk about their experience or success stories, and commitment free. So things, opportunities where people can listen or watch on their own time could really drive interest even further. Because I don't know about y'all, but I'm watching YouTube late at night, not during my workday when there's usually webinars being given by organizations. I want to watch that on my own time. And some people maybe even want to watch it on their own time and in double speed or 1.5 speed or half speed. So when you can record content and make it evergreen so that it can live for a year or two and put that out there, that could help drive engagement in your community because there's no commitment. We're not going to this thing that's at this specific time in this webinar and this onboarding and we're committing to take a pet. We're just wanting to understand the information about this program. So my key takeaways when I looked at all of this were, I just talked about this, informational sessions. So recording videos or audio and posting those online to allow your community to get to know your foster program better. This is not, these don't have to be high production. We're talking, you can record a Zoom call while you're talking through. You can have slides, you cannot have slides. You could record an interview in your shelter with a foster when they're bringing their foster back. And then offering commitment-free trainings. So you don't have to come in and foster. We're just talking today about how to introduce, you know, your foster dogs to your pets at home. And that doesn't mean you're leaving here with the dog. You can just come and learn. That could be really, really helpful to engage your community. Website improvements. Having a dedicated foster page on your website and making sure it's indexed for search. I know a lot of people have foster pages mixed in with volunteers. These are two different things and two different user groups. Fosters are willing to bring somebody into their home, a pet into their home. Volunteers want to usually come and do something at your facility. So having a dedicated foster page and including basic information, foster role descriptions, what financial and supplies you're providing based off of what type of pet, and what types of animals you're seeking foster for. And get specific. Don't just say cats and dogs. Say dogs, small dogs over the age of 7, kittens under the age of 8 weeks, cats between the ages of 1 and 5. Be very, very specific so people know what it is you're trying to actually send to foster. And then the last one, I just think everyone needs to leave here and figure out how to start a dedicated senior pet foster program and market it like crazy because there's obviously interest out there. We just have to capitalize on that interest and get those people in to take those senior pets out of our care as quickly as possible. And so that's uh, the the presentation on the data. Maybe before I go to the last slide where we talk about our next sessions, we look through the chat to see if there's any questions.
Will you unshare for a minute?
Yes.
We can see you. I mean, I think we want people to hang around for a minute because there is a lot here and there's a lot that's actionable. And I think some of the things that we see are that the public wants to help, they want to help, they want you to make it easy. What is not necessarily reflected in this data is how barriers that they face. And so we know they want to help a lot more of your animals, but I keep hearing from shelters. I'm a shelter consultant and I work with some of the biggest shelters in the country and then some smaller ones. And we hear it, we can't get enough fosters, there's too many barriers to people taking home foster pets. We can't manage all these fosters. And it's mostly because of how your program's structured. And so we can see in the presentation that like you need to disconnect training from requirements that happen before you foster. Training should be an opt-in thing. There should be multiple trainings, ongoing teaching and training for people on a lot of topics. But to put that in front of your foster process, that creates a situation in which you can't get fosters. The other thing we see a lot of is people only they're limiting the number of fosters, or they're only doing foster pleas to their existing fosters. And what all of this data suggests is that we should be doing foster pleas publicly on our public pages. Kelly Dewar did some research showing that the shelters that have the biggest programs, a third of their posts are about fosters on across all platforms. So we need to be asking help from people who aren't already helping us and then making it really easy for them to help us. And then last thing I think that comes out of this is that asking people for help with specific groups of animals rather than just saying we need fosters. People don't know. We see the underconfidence reflected in that data, right? April, where like if people aren't sure what that means, they're less likely than if they see there's this group of animals that really need your help right now, they're much more likely to jump on that because they can process that a little bit more clearly.
I would be curious too if you wouldn't want to take it to the other extreme too of saying like this pet, if it's more about kind of this general group of pets. Because when it's like a very specific pet that you're saying this pet needs foster, you're potentially also excluding people that maybe don't
Totally.
like identify with the look of the pet or the size of the pet, and we can't get the public to let go of the way a pet looks. We
Right,
tried.
we're getting ready to do a seniors adoption event and we're showing probably 10 examples, 10 nice photographs of examples of senior pets that right now need help. And then we'll have that same picture, we'll put check marks next to it as we send those to foster to show this is working. But you know, for individual long stay dogs, long stay cats that have been there a year, that might warrant individual marketing. But thinking about in groups of animals and thinking about more talking to the public in terms they understand. I mean, the thing about this presentation that's so compelling to me is that we're maybe not communicating in a way that people feel like I want to help, I know how to help, I know what it means to help, and I can do this and I'm going to start today. Like, we're not really telling that story when we're asking for foster.
Yeah, we've done a good job of helping the public understand what the word foster means. It means you're taking a pet. But we haven't done a good job of the actual, what does that look like for you in your home? And what does the support look like? It's like from a very high level, people get it, but they don't actually get any of the like digging deep down into what is this actually going to mean for me when I take this pet home? What support am I going to get? What do I do in case of an emergency? All of those questions that cross our mind, I think, when we get a pet for ourselves, that we just have to figure out ourselves. That's not out there. It's not being shared. It's not being communicated. Like you said, you're communicating that to them once they are a foster, but
Yeah.
not before they're a foster, like pre-foster work. You have to do the pre-work to get them to become a foster.
Almost like that recruitment, right? When you recruit somebody to, a business or a role or even to work at a shelter, you'll know what is that role, what is expected of me. And I think you're absolutely right. It's about how we communicate and then to get, more definitive about what that means. And then I love the idea about, are there specific animals that need fostering that may speak to someone's, heart, like senior dogs? We all were like, that data resonated with all of us. And so, what can we do? What should we be doing there? I do see a lot of comments there. What I love about the engagement on the chat box is everybody will throw out like questions and everybody's helping each other with some ideas. And so it's brilliant. It's great. I think for some that, that are in small towns, they're looking at how, they feel like they've tapped their community. What else can we do? How do we reach people that are interested? So I see there's a lot of engagement going on there as well. So I don't know if you guys have ideas, Kristen and April.
I love that Jane wrote about asking people when they bring in a dog, asking if they're willing to foster it. And I think Jane said people who want us to take their dog, asking if they're willing and able to foster. That's amazing. Huge applause to you for that. It's really smart. You can do this in a lot of ways. Like when people are coming, if you're in a small town, you feel like you already know everybody. When people are coming to you for help, you can solicit them for help right back, and ask people to foster dogs, especially for like, found animals. You know, ask them if they'll foster for 2 days and try to get that animal home. That's one way because those folks aren't necessarily already your helpers. So that's one way to capture people. April, do you have other things that you're thinking of?
Yeah, what's really interesting is we've done some analysis on this on the like adoption side, and I'm sure there's some similarities with foster where organizations will say, we're doing a study for the state of Massachusetts right now, where all these organizations in Massachusetts are saying there are no adopters for us left in our state. But there is a big disconnect between the audience that an organization is reaching and the audience that the internet is reaching. And we see this time and time again with Adopt a Pet, where an organization's reach is only through their website, and that is only through how well your website is indexed and all those things when people are searching. We're now at 96% of people go online to find information about a business before they walk in. And so I think we have to just kind of step back and recognize that what we're doing as organizations, we are not reaching everyone in the community. And how can we reach more people? And I saw some people talking about going to community events to talk about fostering. That like you have some kind of event where you've got a lot of people. My hometown of 8,000 people, the 4th of July is a big deal. The whole town shut down and everyone goes to the park and there's booths and crafts and all those things. Having a booth talking about pet fostering, you're going to reach people who are not finding you online. So considering other ways, kind of like guerrilla style, right? Or like kind of very grassroots style, talking about your foster programs to the groups of people that don't know, because we know a lot of these people coming to Adopt a Pet are not finding an organization in their area until they've actually found them through Adopt a Pet. They didn't know they existed. They didn't know they had a foster program.
Totally. You know, real talk, everyone, and I mean everyone, 100% of the shelters that have told me that they can't recruit fosters, if I go to their website and social media, I see one post in the last month and a half that mentioned foster, or none. I see their website. I can't even find the foster page. I don't know how to sign up, or I'm told to sign up and someone will contact me within 30 days. Like, if you are feeling, and this isn't your fault, like I've directed 3 shelters, and I'll find out that my staff has made all these barriers I didn't even know about. But if you're feeling like we can't recruit, you gotta go look at the basic ways you are recruiting, because you're gonna be like, oh, right. Like you're probably missing some of the basic things that you could be doing to get more people in the door.
Yeah. Yeah, think outside the box. And you know what? I often default to my partner. When I literally am like, I don't know what to do here because he's not stuck in the little echo chamber I am, or he's not limited by all of the experiences that I've had in animal welfare. And so he will come up with really interesting perspectives and ideas on how to do something as an outsider. And I think of him as like my household has an animal welfare professional and a general public person. And so we
So
yeah, so
smart.
use the people in your life.
Yes, if they read your recruitment and they're like, I don't want to go through this, or they're reading the language. Half the pages I look at start out with who is excluded from fostering, like, what the requirements are, like all of this stuff. And this isn't to beat up on anyone. This is a system problem. It is because we are understaffed, under resources. Most of your programs have 0 to 1 foster coordinators. Like we have to, as an industry, invest in foster as really the heart of operations. I think it's why we're doing the Foster 50 challenge, why our entire dogs and data is focused on foster. Like this is the solution, but we all know how much you struggle to just staff it at this tiny level, and that's why these barriers happen. So it is not a criticism of anyone. It's really to say go check and find out where you're at with your communications.
And pets that are fostered, they get adopted faster. They like we know people coming to our site, they want to actually look at the pets that are in foster because they have higher quality profiles. They have better photos, they have personality traits, they have a better story. People know what they're like in a household. So having pets in foster can lead to more adoptions as long as we keep those fosters engaged about getting them adopted. That's a different challenge. But I think that's why we at Adopt a Pet are very much on this like foster bandwagon as well, because we hear from all of these users over and over again that there's some hesitancy to adopt like directly out of shelter because the shelter doesn't know anything about the pet. And this is also why peer-to-peer adoption is more popular than it's been, because you are adopting directly out of another home where that person knows that pet really, really well and can tell you what to expect at least 50% of the time once you get that pet at home. So that can be really, really helpful. So I'm going to go ahead and reshare, and then Deb's going to close us out. See if I can get this back up. And thank you all so much. Like, this
Yes.
is a very exciting topic. I know it's very important to so many of us that are listening and that will be listening and watching the recording in the future.
Thanks, April. Thanks, Kristen. I think for me, what was engaging was the chat that was going on, because what I love about these sessions is that we have shelters and rescues that are on this call that all want to help each other and may have some possible ideas and solutions to increase some of these challenges and barriers to get more volunteers to foster. So it's been great reading all of this. And yes, this will be recorded. It is being recorded. There will be a push out via email. It will be also on our Foster 50 site, on the Pedigree Foundation site. And also, we'll have to find out about whether or not we can get the chat as well, but I'll check in with you, April, on that, because there is a question about whether or not that will be shareable. So really want to encourage you guys, if you haven't registered for these other sessions, because again, fostering this thematic is what we heard you all wanted to learn more about and get more resources and ideas about. So the data, again, marrying consumer data with shelter data is really important. So the next session is scheduled for September 4th. It's about scaling your foster programs with technology solutions, and AI is a big part of it. And Kristen is an expert there. And then on November 13th, we're going to be looking at foster myth busting. And so that data and research is going to look at how do we separate fact from fiction? How do we get those naysayers to join
We
us?
want everybody to send their haters. The person in your org that's like, no, we can't do this, make them come to that session. It'll help, we promise.
Anyway, thanks all for joining us, and we look forward to you joining us at our next session.